later after the arraignment. I have to say, I'm just a layperson, and I agree with all the legal experts. I've just never seen anything like this indictment. When you read this indictment, I have to say, I didn't think I could be shocked anymore at Donald Trump, at the brazenness. But obviously, you've seen also the new reporting about how many opportunities he was given that he ignored, right? To
Yeah.
make this right.
And this indictment, Steph, when you look at the witnesses who are not named, but who really are identified in the indictment, there are the most sharply incriminating witnesses are referenced as Donald Trump lawyer number one, Donald Trump lawyer number two, Donald Trump lawyer number three, Trump employee number one, Trump employee number
Yeah.
two. By the way, there's a text message that we're just going to drop in here from a Trump family member.
Yeah.
Steph, the incriminating witnesses, the incriminating evidence, all is coming from people who were Trump loyalists, either, presently or currently. It reminded me of the January 6th House Select Committee hearings. All of the incriminating information came from Republicans. I mean, will his Republican supporters ever wake up and realize that he is going to be sunk? He's going to be convicted based on the testimony of largely
Yeah.
Republicans.
Yeah, I thank you. I wish more people would make that point on TV. There is not one Democrat, for in this quote unquote witch hunt. And I have to say, as a prosecutor, I'm curious your take on, as we're saying, like even the indictment is only the tip of it, right? And because so much of it is classified, how do you navigate that as a prosecutor?
So there are procedures that allow for classified documents to be used. And what they do is, instead of saying Iran, for example, they'll say country one, right?
Yeah.
So the jury will have the key. They'll know precisely what it means when they say country one or person A, but it won't necessarily be disclosed publicly. So the jury has everything they need to decide the case. The defense has everything they need to cross-examine the witnesses, but you're not running the risk of damaging national security by exposing all of that more broadly. So there are ways to do it, but you're right, Steph. There are more charges coming. I
Yeah.
think we could see an indictment in New Jersey for his crimes up there. I still absolutely believe we're going to see the insurrection charged against Donald Trump. So Jack Smith is still getting warmed up.
What? Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about that, Glenn. What is your take on why dissemination was not charged? Is that because of the possibility of this tragic Judge Cannon
Yeah,
assignment that
it's
that
an
isn't?
interesting
Yeah, go ahead.
it's an interesting question. I assume Jack Smith indicted what he thought was most properly indicted in that federal jurisdiction in Florida.
Right.
He will have other crimes that he can indict and probably will indict elsewhere, DC, New Jersey. And the New Jersey one may involve dissemination because he's caught on audio tape disseminating it to people who are in
Right.
the room. And that is the one where he was talking about military plans to attack Iran.
But that's what I wanted to ask, Glenn. Is I've heard someone say, well, they may not have wanted to overcharge. My question as a layperson: how do you overcharge espionage? How do you not charge dissemination of classified materials, which is in itself a serious crime, right?
Yeah, but you can only confine a man for but one life, and he's already facing more than 100 years. So we have tactical
Yeah.
decisions to make as a prosecutor. How much national security do we want to put at risk by charging everything that we could charge? You only want to charge your strongest batch of crimes because you don't want to overwhelm the jury. You don't want to have to prove things beyond what is necessary to hold him accountable for the lion's share of his criminal conduct. I didn't always charge every crime I believed I could prove. And there are a lot of tactical reasons for that.
We've heard right wingers screaming that this should not be charged. It's not espionage. Can you explain the Espionage Act to us normies as to,
When
do you
yeah,
have
when
do
we
you have
use
to
the
prove
word
that he sold or gave it to other people or
when we
countries?
use the word espionage, people automatically think, "Oh, he's selling our national secrets to the enemy." What people need to do if they want to educate themselves, just open the United States Code or Google it. Easy to find. Go to chapter 37 of Title 18 of the United States Code. I know this is a mouthful. It is the Espionage Act. There are lots of crimes that fall under the heading of the Espionage Act. One of them is mishandling national defense information, which is exactly what he did, and he was caught on tape
Yeah.
doing it. So the espionage is not just one thing. It can be selling secrets to the enemy, but it can also be mishandling some of our nation's most closely guarded
Do you
secrets.
have the same feeling I do, though, that there's more shoes to drop? I mean, a lot of people, I don't think it's conspiratorial to point out that what Khashoggi was investigating, what he was writing about, was Jared Kushner sharing classified intelligence with the Saudis that led to all of these people being killed or captured in Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, I don't think you need to be Columbo to go, huh? And then Jared Kushner got $2 billion. And I mean, do you feel like there's more shoes to drop, perhaps?
Yeah, how can Jack Smith not be digging into all of this?
Yeah.
When we open investigations and we begin pulling on criminal threads, we follow every all of a sudden going in six different directions because each thing suggests there are more crimes at issue that I
Yeah.
didn't know about in the first instance. I
This leads me to a question about, the Georgia investigation. This headline, of course, struck fear in me. Legal experts fear Fulton County case against Trump could end up being a sprawling mess, only because they keep criming, and it's system can it that you committed so many crimes that it becomes unwieldy. I mean, talk to us about that for a second.
Steph, I've tried cases that people might have looked at from the outside and said, boy, that's a sprawling mess. For example, I might bring a standalone murder case in local superior court for the District of Columbia. And it may turn out that that murder was actually part of a crime spree by a RICO organization. This is something I contended with. So we would take that one murder, we would bring it over in federal court, we would add it to the ongoing RICO case, and we had a case involving 30 murders by the city's most notorious, most dangerous criminal crew ever. We brought it as a RICO case. It involved 30 murders. It was big
Yeah.
and ungainly and sprawling, but you know what? Every last one of those defendants are doing life without the possibility of release because we worked our way through that big, sprawling case in a
Yeah.
way that simplified it all for the jury. That's what Fani Willis will do.
Well, and I'm I'm glad she came out to say, "Well, hang on now, I'm not standing down." That I know, obviously,
Yeah.
Letitia James caused a lot of, I mean, again, once by saying there's been so much criming, local me, Alvin Bragg, Fani Willis may have to stand down while the feds go for yada yada yada. And Fani Willis said, "Oh no," which I was happy to hear. But what's your take on all that?
Yeah, we all misspeak from time to time.
Yeah.
Goodness knows I do it. And
Mhm.
and I think um, New York Attorney General Letitia James got out over her skis because she said, my case, my civil case will have to be suspended.
Right.
And that's her decision to make, Steph. I've been involved in parallel cases where I'm prosecuting a case and there's also a civil case because maybe somebody sued the city in
Yeah.
connection with the crime that I was prosecuting. And what I would do, and I have done, is I would apply to the civil judge. I would file a motion to intervene, ask the civil judge to stay the civil proceedings until the conclusion of the criminal prosecution.
Yeah.
Judges ordinarily will grant that motion. But then when she added, oh, Georgia's criminal case and DA Bragg's criminal case are going to have to stand down unless they gave her authority to make those representations, and they clearly didn't because Fani Willis immediately said, I ain't standing down for the feds. This is not going to
Yeah.
impact my case down in
Yeah.
Georgia. I was glad she said that. I just think Tish James can speak to her civil case, but she can't talk to cases in other jurisdictions, particularly criminal cases in other jurisdictions.
To my point about Saudi Arabia, you tweeted, in how many ways did Donald Trump pick the pockets of everyday Americans to help Russia, Saudi Arabia, and big oil? Speaking of more shoes to drop. But let's talk about, because we obviously brought up Judge Cannon. You said Judge Cannon, who abused her discretion previously in favor of Trump, should recuse herself from the Trump case. If she doesn't, DOJ should file a motion to recuse. This issue is too important to ignore and hope for the best. I mean, it is giving a lot of us gastric distress.
Yeah,
So,
today's Justice Matters video on my YouTube channel is all about the legal ins and outs of why Judge Cannon is disqualified under the federal law, why she must remove or recuse herself from the case, and if she doesn't, she has to be removed. Jack Smith's team should file a motion to recuse and fight that battle, because the standard to disqualify a judge is if their impartiality can reasonably be questioned. Not that they can't be impartial, but if their impartiality can reasonably be questioned, the law says they must recuse themselves. I would bet my $1. I'm not a high roller. I have a $1 betting limit. I would bet my buck that we will not see Aileen Cannon preside over this case at the end of the day.
Oh God, I hope you're good. Your lips to God's ears. Okay. So speaking of his entire defense team, the Republican Party, you said guys like Jim Jordan and Lindsey Graham will never acknowledge the reality of Trump's guilt because they fear that when Trump decides he needs to throw everyone under the bus to try to stay out of prison, he will tell the feds everything he knows about Jim and Lindsey. I mean, I expect them to defend him on January 6th when that indictment comes down because they're involved. But I have to say, even I was shocked at the lawlessness of largely the Republican reaction to espionage. Were you?
Yeah, no, I think it's the notion of mutually assured destruction. If Donald Trump sits down with the feds because at some point his calculation is, I can save myself all prison time or some prison time. I don't think he can, but if that's his calculation, if I tell the feds everything these dang members of Congress were doing that I know about, he will do that in a New York minute. And that's why the Lindsey Grahams and the Jim Jordans and the McCarthys and others are at risk. And they can't break from Trump because they don't want their dirt exposed.
I mean, this is one of the most cowardly headlines in just a season of cowardice. Republicans privately acknowledge Trump's legal woes are serious this time. Privately. I mean, it just, okay. All right. Speaking of rule of law, you said Donald Trump arraigned on criminal indictment, but judge imposes no conditions on his pretrial release. You said the standard for pretrial detention is clear and convincing evidence the defendant is a flight risk or a danger to the community. Trump indisputably poses a danger to the community, more so than thousands of others who are presently jailed pending. Yeah, and we were just saying today, of course he's already violating he's not going to stay off social media. He's not going to not talk to Walt Nauta. I mean, he doesn't follow any rules. What happens with that?
Yeah, the equal application of law is suffering right now because, when you look at one of the most recently arrested and detained defendants for mishandling classified information, 21-year-old National Guardsman named Jack Teixeira. Since April, he has been cooling his heels in pretrial detention, and he will remain jailed until he's tried. And yet, I think by all accounts, he probably did 1/1,000,000th of the damage to our national security as Donald Trump has done, and yet Donald Trump walks free and goes to fundraisers. That is a deep injustice at play in our criminal justice system right now. And I think that's unfortunate. Maybe it's not surprising, but I think it's something that we still have to. Equal justice means if
order,
Shut the up, Donnie.
which essentially would be right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like the E. Jean Carroll, right? He won't shut up, and so now she gets to add. I know this headline was just to make me happy. NBC's Frank. That's just to make us happy. But Malcolm Nance made the case yesterday too. Cannot make another deal like Spiro Agnew, and just say, okay, you can get out of it. Sends a horrible.
Donald Trump thought he could crime with impunity because Richard Nixon did it and he got away with it.
Yeah.
You can draw a straight line from Richard Nixon to Donald Trump. And I agree with Frank and I agree with Malcolm. I believe he will see the inside of a prison because if he doesn't, every January 6th, every 4 years will look exactly like January 6th. failed to deter that kind of criminal behavior from the loser of a presidential election, they will actually encourage it. They will put their stamp of approval on what Donald Trump did if they don't prosecute him and imprison him. And that's why I believe they will.
Prison in Pride Month, because I feel like I'm not even gay at all anymore. Lie.
Oh, God.
Okay, quickly before you go, we linked to your piece. Walt Naughta's indictment is a warning to Trump's all those boxes to Florida. He had help, obviously. And talk to us about others and about Walt Naughta and what do you think is going to happen?
This is such an interesting who were assisting and enabling Trump's crimes.
Yeah.
You know what my conclusion is? Walt Nauta is the only one who wouldn't flip, who wouldn't plead. There may be people who have pleaded guilty, and that's under seal, so it's not yet revealed publicly.
Yeah.
They may have testified against him in the grand jury, and that's why there's only one co-conspirator, the only guy who was hanging tough with Donald Trump. But even he may flip at the end of the day, because once you see your name as a marquee defendant on a federal indictment like this, tends to get your attention. Old Walt may flip as well.
Yeah, I would hope so. Glenn Kirschner at Sexy Liberal LA, October 21st, the indictment tour, the only show in 23. Oh my God. All right. Thank you, Glenn. Love you. See you next week.
Thanks, Steph. Love you. See you guys.
Thanks. There he goes. 52 minutes after the hour. This portion of the show brought to you by Hi, good morning, Jill Wine-Banks. Happy second arraignment.
Oh God, it's the best. It's the best. And I love the memories of bipartisanship and Republicans believing in facts.
Yeah.
Those were the days. Those were the days.
Yeah. I mean, Jill, that's we've had so many conversations about how this Republican Party is different than during Watergate, but it really is just, I don't even know the word anymore, just sickening, this Republican